Welcome to the London Jesuit Centre. My name is John Moffatt. In this episode on the end of the world, I want to present Thomas Aquinas' classic explanation of how it all works, along with some hints at the way different bits of the Christian apocalyptic narrative continue to have some philosophical attraction in the modern era, even among non-Christians. In the final episode, by way of contrast, I'll return to Teilhard de Chardin's very different proposal for the process of the new creation, and will then need to take time to reflect on how this complex process we have been following can produce text that is sacred and life-giving for modern believers. So let's go back to one classical analytical account of the new creation, which comes from the Western Middle Ages. In the aftermath of the Reformation, one of the people chosen as a model for Catholic thinking was the great 13th century Dominican theologian Thomas Aquinas. At the end of the turbulent 19th century, Pope Leo XIII again affirmed the place of his writings as a starting point for modern Catholic theologians. Now, when it comes to the end of the world, we need to recognize that Thomas, like any scholar, is writing within a context of contemporary debates. There are lots of things we now know about the universe that 13th century thinkers had no idea about. But that does not mean that their attempts to think analytically about articles of faith cannot usefully stir our own thinking. Thomas's writings give us a useful snapshot of how Christians 800 years ago were answering awkward questions about the end of the universe and the new creation using the available science and philosophy of their time. Here, I can only give you some of the headlines. If you want the detail, and be careful what you wish for, you'll have to go to part 3 of his Summa Theologiae, the Compendium of Theology. Thomas takes as his starting point that the fundamental story of the universe is salvation history. It is a story of rescuing human souls to enjoy life with God. A consequence of this for him is that the physical universe as it currently exists is only there for the sake of the creation and salvation of human beings. So he argues that the only bits of it that will continue to exist when the new creation is revealed are the bits that are still useful to humans in their new post-apocalyptic state with their new resurrection bodies. So one of the first things to go is the movement of the heavens. That was only needed to keep all the biological events of the earth going. Remember that in Aristotle's world, the movement of the heavens, going back to a first mover, God, is the ultimate source of movement and change on earth. It allows things to be born, to grow, to flourish, and then to fade away. But for Thomas, that movement was only there for the sake of the salvation history of humans. It is only needed in order to allow for the generation of the number of people that God has decided will exist. Once that number is complete, the heavens can stop moving. Everything can now be static. What about the material of the universe, though? Humans, by definition, have bodies, and so human bodies need to carry on existing in the new world. Thomas argues that there need to be other bodies besides human ones in the new world. If humans need to be able to recognize their creator through a creation out there. So in the new creation, there will be some equivalent of the primary elements, which scientists had accepted since the time of Aristotle: earth, air, fire, and water. There will also have to be something like the fifth element, the indestructible element that makes up the realm of the stars. But these elements can't just be the same as they were before. There must be no doubt that they are the work of the Creator. So all these different types of body, human, earthly, and celestial, need to be touched up a bit, to be glorified. Here, Thomas picks up on the language of St. Paul. These new glorious bodies can then reveal the reality of God, their Maker, all the more clearly. So all the stars become brighter. those 4 basic elements rescued from our old earth, now glow with a new light. The human bodies, made of a new indestructible substance, like the bodies of the stars, glow brightly as well. Humans in these new bodies are able to gaze with new eyes on these new glories, which include the glory of the body of Christ. Through this physical vision, they are enabled to recognize the glory of God. At the same time, in a non-bodily way, the saints, with their inmost self, their mind, are able to contemplate God as God is in God's self. This is the beatific vision, a source of eternal delight. Sadly, for animal and plant lovers, Thomas's new creation is less interesting. Animals and plants belong irrevocably to the world of change and decay that has come to an end. They are no longer needed for the new humans. Thomas's new creation is timeless. It belongs to creatures with minds, capable of knowing God in the eternal moment in changeless bodies. If those bodies are like anything familiar at all, they are most like solid light. Back to the human story. We need to remember that Thomas's speculations about the end of the world are not official church teaching. They are Thomas's way of trying to solve the puzzles raised by core Christian beliefs using the philosophical and scientific language available to him at the time. We have a different language, and we are perfectly entitled to explore different ways of making sense of the paradoxes generated by Christian commitment to belief in the resurrection of the body and life in the communion of saints in the new creation. And we can perfectly legitimately bring in our own insights about the structure of the material universe and our place in it. We would probably want to recognize a greater eternal value in the dynamics of the biosphere than Thomas does. And as always, we have to remember that the analytic approach represented by theologians like Thomas Aquinas is secondary to theological narrative. The narrative is an epic encompassing the universe. The intense drama of personal salvation is caught up in the big story of the creation, rescue, and recreation of the whole universe through the incarnation of the Son of God. That sort of thought lies between Martin Luther's criticism of Christian philosophy in the 16th century. Luther argued that Christianity's ferocious intellectual engagement with the thought and culture of the Greeks and others had taken it too far away from the basic human story about the gracious relationship with God revealed in Jesus Christ. For the Reformers, the Bible texts give us just that human story, and that is all the wisdom we need. The Bible tells us all we need to know about the end of time and our own destiny in it. Philosophy and complicated thinking will not help us get to heaven. That's a position which many Catholic Christians might be sympathetic to as well, especially as it has become a more common practice among ordinary Catholics to read the Bible. But there will always be those who want to and need to think things through. The story of the apocalypse is a powerful one and continues to prompt new explanatory narratives, religious and secular. Apocalypse now. We can see this when we take some of those core features of the biblical narrative of the apocalypse. God's eternal kingdom of justice will be established after the wicked powers of the earth have been devastated by war and plague. All of this, remember, unfolds according to a timetable ultimately controlled by God. That's actually been a popular idea in revolutionary Christian movements throughout the centuries. Unsurprisingly, it has been systematically resisted by politically established forms of Christianity. No empire, Christian or otherwise, likes revolutions. But we can notice how that narrative has also taken on a very secular guise in the thought of Karl Marx and friends. Marx had his own version of the history of ideas, and occasionally directly references Christian doctrinal history. He deploys the apocalyptic ideas that history unfolds according to a plan, though for him it is a plan without a planner, and is evolving through a series of inevitable conflicts to a new era of justice and plenty, in which there is no more exploitation of the poor by the rich and powerful. But there are elements of end-of-the-world thinking that are accepted by earlier non-revolutionary thinkers. The philosopher Immanuel Kant and the economist Adam Smith, in different ways, take it as a fact of life that goodness is not rewarded in this world. Both, however, believe that ethics was in some sense an important reality in human life. For them, as a consequence, if we are to make sense of our calling as humans to live a good life, we must believe in a world beyond this one, where wrongs can be righted and the good receive their just deserts. For these thinkers, the notions of end of the world, judgment, reward and punishment are not just theological ideas inherited from the past, but ideas crucial for making sense of the moral life now. Of course, these examples are a long way from providing the sort of complete account of the end of the world that Thomas attempted. In the next episode, we'll take a longer look at one 20th century Christian take and at the challenges of those trying to tell the apocalyptic Christian story in the 21st century. Thank you for listening, and see you next episode.